In the chaotic world of medieval Europe, queens were often remembered as wives, mothers, or pawns in political games. But Emma of Normandy was different. She was a woman who refused to fade into the background, even when her life hung by a thread. The year was 1016. England was collapsing under the weight of Viking invasions. Her husband, King Aethelred the Unready, had just died, leaving the kingdom vulnerable and her children in grave danger. For most queens, this would have been the moment to flee back home, but not Emma. Instead, she made a decision so daring, so unconventional, that it changed the destiny of England forever. Who was this strong-minded woman? Why did she stay in a hostile land, surrounded by enemies, when escape was possible? And how did she manage to turn a deadly threat into a bold opportunity that reshaped the future of the English crown? This is the story of Emma of Normandy, the forgotten queen who risked everything to save England. 5. Background of Emma of Normandy. To understand Emma's courage and cunning, we need to go back to her beginnings. Emma was born around 985 in Normandy, the daughter of Richard the Ruthless, Duke of Normandy, and Gunnar. Normandy itself was a land forged by Vikings who had settled in France generations earlier. And Emma inherited that bold Viking spirit through her bloodline. She grew up in a powerful court, surrounded by politics, alliances, and the constant threat of war. From an early age, Emma would have learned that survival in this world required more than just noble birth. It required intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to turn enemies into allies. When she was still young, Emma was sent across the Channel to marry King Aethelred of England. This marriage was not a love story, it was a political alliance. For Aethelred, it meant strengthening ties with Normandy at a time when Viking raids were intensifying. For Emma, it meant leaving her homeland behind and stepping into one of the most turbulent kingdoms in Europe. Life in England was not easy. Aethelred, known by history as the Unready, because of his poor leadership and disastrous decisions, struggled to defend his kingdom against the relentless Viking threat. Emma quickly realized that she could not rely on her husband's strength. Instead, she would have to rely on her own. Her position as queen gave her influence, but it also made her a target. She bore children who had claims to the English throne, making her central to the kingdom's future. In the deadly game of politics, Emma's survival and her choices would decide the fate of England itself. 5. England in crisis, the Viking threat. At the turn of the 11th century, England was in turmoil. Viking fleets, commanded by powerful Scandinavian kings, were no longer content with raiding coastal villages. They sought to rule. Their eyes were fixed on England, one of the wealthiest kingdoms in Europe. King Aethelred, Emma's husband, was ill-prepared for the storm. His nickname, the Unready, comes from the Old English word unread, meaning poor counsel. And indeed, his reign was marked by hesitation, failed strategies, and missed opportunities. Instead of uniting his nobles against the Viking menace, he sowed distrust and discontent. By 1013, the situation had grown dire. King Svein Forkbeard of Denmark launched a massive invasion, and the English nobility, weary of Aethelred's failures, submitted to the Viking king. Emma, along with Aethelred and their children, was forced to flee into exile in Normandy, her homeland. But exile was not safety. It was humiliation. Emma must have watched as her husband's authority crumbled, her children's inheritance slipped away, and England fell under foreign rule. Yet she did not abandon hope. When Svein Forkbeard died suddenly in 1014, Aethelred seized the chance to reclaim his throne, returning to England with Emma by his side. But his victory was short-lived. In 1016, just 2 years later, Aethelred died, leaving Emma a widow in a kingdom once again under attack, this time from Swein's formidable son, Cnut the Great. For Emma, the danger was immediate and personal. As the widow of a fallen king and the mother of royal heirs, she was now a target. Many in her place would have fled across the Channel to safety in Normandy, but Emma refused. She stayed, determined to fight for her position, her children, and the fate of England itself. 1.5 Emma's bold gamble, winning over Cnut the Great. With Aethelred dead and England under siege, Emma faced a crossroads. She could return to Normandy in defeat, or she could risk everything to stay in a hostile kingdom, now controlled by a Viking conqueror. Most widowed queens of the time would have chosen safety, but Emma was no ordinary woman. She understood that her survival, and perhaps England's, depended on making herself indispensable to the new ruler. That ruler was Cnut the Great, the son of Sweyn Forkbeard. Unlike his father, Cnut was not just a raider. He was ambitious, determined to build a vast empire stretching from Scandinavia to England. To secure his power, he needed legitimacy, and Emma offered exactly that. Emma made a daring proposal. She would marry Cnut on one condition, that her children with Aethelred would be spared, and that any future sons she bore with Cnut would have a claim to the throne. It was a bold gamble. In offering her hand, Emma transformed herself from a vulnerable widow into the queen of a new dynasty. This was more than survival. By aligning herself with Cnut, Emma ensured she would remain at the heart of English politics. She also reshaped the balance of power, giving Cnut a sense of legitimacy among the English nobility who still clung to the old royal line. For Cnut, Emma's offer was irresistible. She was not only the widow of the former king, but also the daughter of the powerful Duke of Normandy. Their marriage strengthened his ties with the Normans and bolstered his image as a rightful ruler, not merely a foreign conqueror. In this union, both Emma and Cnut found what they needed most. For him, a crown secured. For her, survival and influence. It was one of the most audacious political moves in medieval history. A queen who chose alliance with her enemy to protect her children and the kingdom she called home. Narada 155, Queen of Two Dynasties. Emma's marriage to Cnut was far more than a personal survival strategy. It was the foundation of a powerful new dynasty. With this union, Emma became queen not once, but twice. First as the wife of Aethelred the Unready, and now as the consort of Cnut the Great. Few queens in medieval Europe could claim such influence across rival bloodlines. Cnut quickly proved himself not just a conqueror, but a capable ruler. His reign brought stability after years of chaos. Under his leadership, England became part of what historians call the North Sea Empire, a vast realm that included Denmark, Norway, and parts of Sweden. And standing beside him was Emma, whose presence gave legitimacy to this empire's English branch. Emma bore Cnut children, most notably Cnut, who would later ascend the throne. But she never abandoned her sons from her first marriage, Edward and Alfred. She was always calculating, always working to ensure that her lineage, through one branch or another, would remain tied to the English crown. This dual role gave Emma extraordinary power. She was the link between two dynasties, the Anglo-Saxon line of Aethelred and the Scandinavian line of Cnut. Her unique position meant that no matter who eventually claimed the throne, Emma's bloodline would endure. But this balancing act was perilous. Rival factions at court watched her every move, and her children's competing claims to the throne would eventually tear England apart. Still, in the moment, Emma stood unmatched. A queen whose survival instincts had elevated her above the turbulence of conquest and war. She was not a passive figurehead. She was a political strategist, navigating between dynasties, ensuring that she and her family would remain at the very heart of English power. 1.5 Trials of Power, Betrayal and Loss. While Emma's marriage to Cnut secured her position, her path as queen was far from smooth. The court was a nest of rivalries with competing heirs, powerful nobles, and shifting alliances, all threatening her delicate balance of power. When Cnut died in 1035, Emma's world was once again thrown into uncertainty. Their son Cnut was still in Denmark, securing his rule there, leaving Emma vulnerable in England. In the meantime, Cnut's other son by a previous relationship, Harald Harefoot, seized the opportunity to claim the throne. Emma had to fight to protect her influence and the rights of her children. She placed her hopes on her sons from her first marriage, Edward and Alfred, who had grown up in Normandy. But when Alfred attempted to return to England in 1036, tragedy struck. He was captured by supporters of Harald Harefoot and brutally blinded, a wound that soon killed him. This devastating loss was not only personal, but also political. It left Emma's position weakened and cast doubt on her ability to protect her family's future. Whispers of betrayal surrounded her. Some claimed she had failed to act decisively. Others even suggested she had been complicit in Alfred's fate. For a queen who had built her life on strategy and survival, this was one of the darkest chapters. Emma found herself exiled once again, retreating to Flanders as Harold Harefoot tightened his grip on England. But Emma was not broken. She had endured exile before, and she knew how to bide her time. She still had powerful allies, and she was determined that her surviving sons would one day reclaim the English crown. 1.5 Fear. Return to power, the Queen's resilience. Emma's exile in Flanders could have been the end of her influence, but she was no ordinary widow queen. Patient, calculating, and unbroken, she waited for her chance to return. That opportunity came in 1040, when Harold Harefoot died unexpectedly. With Harold gone, the throne of England was once again contested, and Emma seized her moment. She called upon her son Harthacnut, now a powerful king in Denmark, to cross the sea and reclaim his father's English crown. Harthacnut returned, welcomed by Emma and her supporters. For a brief time, mother and son ruled side by side, re-establishing the dominance Emma had long fought to maintain. Chroniclers even noted that she wielded unusual influence at court, more than most queens of her time. But Emma's trials were not over. Harthacnut died suddenly in 1042, collapsing during a wedding feast, leaving Emma once again vulnerable to shifting tides of power. This time, however, her careful maneuvering paid off. Her surviving son from her first marriage, Edward, later known as Edward the Confessor, ascended the throne. After years of struggle, betrayal, and exile, Emma's vision was finally realized. The bloodline she had worked so tirelessly to defend once again ruled England. Emma returned to Winchester, where she lived with honor and recognition as the mother of the king. Though her influence waned as Edward consolidated power, her survival and political skill had already shaped England's destiny. 1.15 Legacy of Emma of Normandy. Emma of Normandy's story is one of survival, intelligence, and political mastery in an age when women were rarely granted lasting power. Twice a Queen of England, wife to 2 kings, and mother to 2 more, she stood at the very heart of one of the most turbulent chapters in English history. Her decisions altered the balance of power between England, Denmark, and Normandy, weaving together dynasties that would ultimately change the course of Europe. Without her courage to negotiate with Cnut, the Viking ruler may have crushed the fragile English realm entirely. Without her persistence, her children might never have lived to ascend the throne. Chroniclers who remembered her often disagreed about her character. Some painted her as ambitious and ruthless, while others admired her as wise and devout. But all acknowledged her influence. She was not a passive figure, but a strategist, someone who understood that survival required both charm and strength. Emma's greatest legacy came through her son, Edward the Confessor, whose reign prepared the stage for the Norman conquest of 1066. Through her, the link between England and Normandy was forged, leading to the rise of William the Conqueror, her great-nephew, who reshaped the English world forever. Though her name is less remembered than the kings she served and bore, Emma of Normandy was the thread that tied together Viking rulers, Anglo-Saxon kings, and Norman dukes. She risked her life for England, and in doing so, secured her place as one of the most remarkable women of the medieval age. 1.1 History is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, make sure to subscribe to Before Wi-Fi, turn on the notification bell, and leave us a comment about which hidden story you'd like us to explore next. Your likes and shares keep these forgotten tales alive.